Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Beatles Forever. It's time for the Beatles on this date. So let's see what happened on the date of May 11th. Our first story, and all that comes after, is from the Beatles Bible. The first story is filming Help, and this happened on Tuesday, the 11th of May, 1965. This was the Beatles' second day of filming at Cliveden House, a 19th century stately home in Maidenhead, Berkshire. It was also the group's final day of work on the Help film. Shooting had begun in the Bahamas on February 23, 1965, and the group totaled 54 days' work. A number of scenes in London were also filmed by director Richard Lester on the following day, May the 12th, but did not feature the Beatles. Cliveden House was used for the Buckingham Palace scenes in Help. During their time there, the Beatles were challenged to a relay race around the gardens, which was filmed on an 8mm home movie camera by a member of the crew. I'd really like to see that film. And they won the race against 3 other teams made up of electricians, carpenters, and camera operators from the shoot. Each of the 4 teams had 6 members, and the Beatles team also included their road manager, Neil Aspinall, and their driver, Alf Bicknell. The second story is the U.S. EP release, 4 by the Beatles, and this was on the date of May the 11th, 1964, on a Monday. The first of 2 Beatles EPs released by Capitol Records was issued on this day. 4 by the Beatles had the serial number of capital EAP 1-2121 and was released only in mono. The 4 songs had previously been issued in the United States on Meet the Beatles, or the Beatles' second album. They were Roll Over Beethoven, All My Loving, This Boy, and Please Mr. Postman. A subsequent EP, the similarly titled 4 by the Beatles, was released by Capitol on February the 1st, 1965. The format wasn't a hit with the U.S. record buyers, and no further official EPs followed. Our third story is Lennon and McCartney promote Apple in New York. This was dated May the 11th, Saturday, 1968. In order to launch and promote Apple Corps in the United States, John Lennon and Paul McCartney flew to New York for a 4-day trip. It was the first time they had both visited the country together since their final concert in August 1966. They were joined by Magic Alex, Neil Aspinall, Mal Evans, and Derek Taylor, and while in the U.S., they met a number of friends and business associates. Lennon and McCartney stayed with their lawyer, Nat Weiss, at his apartment at 181 East 73rd Street. During the trip, they did numerous interviews, mainly at hotels, and they returned to England on May the 16th, 1968. The fourth story is George Harrison performs on a Jack Bruce session. This is dated May the 11th, 1969, on a Sunday. From Morgan Studios, London, producer Felix Papalardi. George Harrison had previously written the song Badge with Eric Clapton and recorded it with Cream in 1968. When Cream split, he remained on good terms with all the former members. On this occasion, Harrison accepted an invitation to perform on singer and bassist John Bruce's debut solo album. He is said to have arrived an hour early for the session and recorded a rhythm guitar part for the song Never Tell Your Mother She's Out of Tune. The album was Songs for a Tailor, which was released later in 1969. Harrison's guitar part became largely buried in the mix, but performed some distorted chords as part of the backing track. For contractual reasons, Harrison's name didn't appear on the album credits. Instead, the pseudonym he had used for the recording of Badge, El Angelo Misterioso, made a reappearance. The fifth story was recording and mixing Baby You're a Rich Man, and this was dated May the 11th, 1967, on a Thursday. This came from Studio One, Olympic Sound Studios, London, producer George Martin, engineer Keith Grant. This was the Beatles' second UK session to take place outside EMI Studios, following their February the 9th, 1967 visit to Regent Sound Studio. It took place at Olympic Sound Studios, an independent studio situated at 117 Church Road, Barnes, London. The balance engineer was Olympics manager Keith Grant. The studio was often used by the Rolling Stones, and Mick Jagger was a visitor on this occasion. The Beatles were working on Baby You're a Rich Man, intended for the Yellow Submarine soundtrack, but which was eventually used as a B-side to All You Need Is Love. It was the Beatles' first song to be recorded and mixed entirely away from Abbey Road. Keith Grant said, "I'm a terrible pusher on sessions. I do a lot of orchestral work, and you naturally push people along." The Beatles said that this was the fastest record they ever made. They were used to a much more leisurely pace. "We started the session at about 9 p.m., and it was finished and mixed by 3 a.m., vocals and everything. They kept playing, version after version, and then we spooled back to the one they liked and overdubbed the vocals. One tape reel was filled with rehearsal takes before 12 takes were recorded. The last of these was the best attempt and featured piano, drums, maracas, and tambourine. Paul McCartney then overdubbed a bass guitar part, and John Lennon sang lead vocals with harmonies by McCartney and others in the chorus. 2 reduction mixes were then made to free up space on the tape. The second, known as Take 2, had George Harrison's lead guitar and Lennon's clavioline introduction overdubbed onto track 3. Track 4 was filled with more vocals, some backward piano in the final verse, and a single note of vibraphone played by tape operator Eddie Kramer. A mono mix was then made, and it took just one attempt and became the version released on All You Need Is Love single. Our sixth story is Wings Live, Hippodrome, Bristol, and this is dated May the 11th, 1973, on a Friday. Paul McCartney and Wings. Wings performed at the Hippodrome in Bristol, England on this date, and it was the opening night of the 18-date Wings 1973 UK tour. The supporting act was Brinsley Schwartz. And then Sean Strang, who was a Welsh girl for the Wings Fun Club newsletter, said, "Here is Denny Lane. Do you know him?" "Yeah." And before we could say any more, the rest of Wings came in behind him. I always laugh at the teeny bopper screaming, but I will admit I was one of them for that night. Sorry, Henry and Paul, who tried in vain to stop us. I was up in the gods and nobody looked up there, but we were moving. Halfway through, Paul said, "What do you want now?" And everybody yelled different things, and then I yelled, "Hi, hi, hi." And he turned around and spoke to Henry, and then came back saying, "Hi, hi, hi, coincidence." All too soon they go off. Now everyone is on their feet, shouting, yelling, so back they come for one more song. Off again. Now the noise is deafening, but the curtain goes down and the lights go on. Wings comes back, Paul with his arm around Linda. He says goodbye, and it really was the end. I really think all the audience enjoyed the show, especially the variety. The cuddle time and my love, contrasting with the good old rock music. Okay, Wings were, at this time, Paul McCartney on vocals, guitar, and bass guitar, Linda McCartney on vocals and keyboards, Denny Lane on vocals, guitar, and bass guitar, Henry McCulloch on guitar and vocals, and Denny Sewell on drums. And the songs on the concert list were Soily, Big Barn Bed, Win the Night, Wild Love, Seaside Woman, Little Woman Love, Sea Moon, Live and Let Die, Maybe I'm Amazed, My Love, Go Now, Say You Don't Mind, The Mess, Hi Hi Hi, and Long Tall Sally. The seventh story is the Beatles Live, Imperial Ballroom, Nelson, and this is dated the May the 11th, 1963, on a Saturday. The Beatles returned to Liverpool from their respective holidays on May the 9th, 1963, and 2 days later performed their first concert since April 27th. They performed at the Imperial Ballroom on Carr Street in Nelson, a town in East Lancashire. Around 2,000 teenagers saw the Beatles play, with more enthusiastic fans held back by bouncers at the foot of the stage. Other acts to perform the ballroom, which burned down in 1976, including Otis Redding, The Who, The Rolling Stones, The Jimi Hendrix Experience, and Tom Jones. And the last story is Paul McCartney Live, Piazza del Colosio, Rome. And this is dated May 2003 on the 11th, on a Sunday. It was the 24th date of the Back in the World tour, which lasted for 33 days between March and June 2003. This free concert took place outside the world-famous Coliseum inside which McCartney played a charity show for 400 fans the night before. McCartney's band was Paul Wickens, vocals, keyboards, guitar, percussion, harmonica; Brian Ray, vocals, guitar, bass; Rusty Anderson, vocals, guitar; and Abe Labriel Jr., vocals and drums. So I will end the video here. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you haven't subscribed, if you could do so, it would help the channel to grow, as well as giving it a thumbs up. It's all a great help. And if you haven't clicked on the notification bell, if you could do that, it lets you know when a video is posted. And I wish everyone a good day. Tune in again soon for the Beatles Forever and the Beatles on this date. Thank you. Bye.